Welcome back to the Done Deal Show. Lots of transfer news to bring you ahead of what could not just be an exciting January transfer window, but a very pivotal one for multiple clubs. Starting with Arsenal, a big report today regarding them improving their midfield during this January transfer window. The article alludes to Arsenal being planning for life without Thomas Partey. We saw in the summer Arsenal nearly let him go. There's been major injury problems. And we also know there's been some off-the-field issues as well that haven't been directly publicized in his name. But there's a number of issues surrounding Thomas Partey. Everybody has a different theory as to why the club is looking to move him on. Mine is more around his fitness. And I believe the club is looking at it and saying, look at his age, look at his current injury record. Can we bring somebody else in who's more available, who can impact this team in a positive way? And Douglas Luiz, Jacob Ramsey is also another player, but Douglas Luiz is higher up on the priority list. But with Aston Villa flying, the likelihood of getting him away from them in January is going to be very difficult indeed, especially with Arsenal sailing very close to the wind in relation to FFP. A name that has now emerged is Everton's Onana. He is being watched, and a number of journalists have spoken about Arsenal now looking to maybe activate this transfer. There's also another player in João Paulinho of Fulham who has also been linked to Arsenal. However, do they really need an out-and-out DM when they have Declan Rice? Not someone of Paulinho's level. I think Declan Rice is doing such a tremendous job in that role. He's been the best player in the Premier League this year. So why fix an element that isn't broken? Onana, for me, though, would be an interesting one. I love him at Manchester United. He's good technically. Let's have it right. He's a good to very good technician on the ball. But what he has is a commodity and an attribute that in 2023 is key. Now, I know eye test merchants don't like this, but somebody's athleticism, their physicality, their power are very important in the modern day game. If you don't have a team that is full of athletes, regardless of how technically gifted you are, you will struggle. Pep Guardiola's style of football hasn't changed dramatically over the past 15 years. But if you look at the size and the physicality and the athleticism of the players in his current great Manchester City team versus his teams of 10 to 15 years ago, there's a sheer difference in size. There's a sheer difference in the amount of athletes you now have. And that is what's going to be key. So if they cannot bring in Douglas Luiz, Onana is a player they look to be focusing on. I think it would be an absolute sensational signing. I believe anybody that picks him up will be getting a bargain. Has he been the greatest player in the world at Everton? No. But I do believe in a better team with a different style of football, you will see this man be an absolute powerhouse for a team like Arsenal, a team like Manchester United, a team, he won't go there because they've already got players like him, but Liverpool in the Premier League. But Gooners, let me know what you think and feel about this story. Interestingly as well, another piece I read today was about Brentford inquiring about Eddie Nketiah in recent weeks, and Crystal Palace have made an approach. Now, Eddie Nketiah is an interesting player because he's on a lot of money. He's a good football player. He probably is a Premier League player. And I think he'll actually do better at a Brentford, do better at a Palace, do better at a West Ham than at Arsenal. I believe you will see him flourish when he's not up against as many low blocks, when he has slightly more time on the ball. Those fractions of seconds at the elite end of football are key. And if Arsenal can raise £40 million, that goes a long way to making the Ivan Toney deal closer. They do need to raise some funds. It's very unlikely that the Cronkies are going to pump their own cash into the club. They should, but they're probably not going to. So selling players is going to be key. And if you can move out Eddie Nketiah in January and bring in Ivan Toney, the upgrade is like going from a Ford Cougar to a damn Range Rover. It would be a phenomenal piece of business. Gooners, in the comments section below, let us know what you think and feel. Now, moving to West London. This is such an interesting story from Fabrizio Romano. He says for January, it would take an important proposal to sell Conor Gallagher. But if it's something more than 35 million, then Chelsea could be open to discussing it. And I find this to be such an interesting deal. I don't rate Conor Gallagher that highly. So I'm not speaking here through my opinion, my feelings, my emotions on this deal. by the way, as an outsider, as a rival. I'm going to speak upon this deal from the lens of Poch, through the lens of this man being a captain this season, through the lens of him being an important player this year, and in fact, having been one of Chelsea's best performers this season in what has been a bad year. So I'm not suggesting you shouldn't improve on Conor Gallagher. But what I do find interesting is, does Poch agree with this? Is this a deal that Maurizio is going to stand behind, that Maurizio is happy with, that Pochettino is going to feel supported by? Genuinely, are they going to feel supported? Is he going to feel supported? Is his coaching staff going to be supported by this deal, a player that he currently relies upon? Now, if they sell him and they bring in an absolute star, 26, 27-year-old star to play in that midfield, then you can understand the exchange. But there'd be far more worse performers than him this year. So Chelsea fans, I really want to gauge where you stand with this deal. First of all, I want your opinion on what you want to happen with Conor Gallagher. But then I want you to remove your bias, remove your own opinion, forget what you feel for a moment, and put yourself in the shoes of your manager. Is this the right thing? You may want it, but that doesn't make it right. I want a layered opinion here. Your thoughts, and then change the lens, change your perspective, stand in somebody else's shoes, and give me your thoughts on that. Let me know in the comments section below. Now, at Manchester United, there's a lot going on at the moment. And this story that came out in the Manchester Evening News is, for me, I am not going to allow myself to become overexcited, because whenever the Glazers are involved, I will remain skeptical until I see delivery, until I see sustained long-term improvements. But it's reported now that Newcastle United sporting director Dan Ashworth is Ineos's prime choice to assume a role at Manchester United. And this is coupled with the idea of Blanc coming in, that is Jean-Claude Blanc, coming in as a new CEO for Richard Arnold leaving. And the club is trying to also bring in Paul Mitchell. And the idea would be there'd be roles created for Dan Ashworth, Paul Mitchell, and Blanc to, between them, run the football operation at Manchester United. Now, for years, we've been screaming for some of the best in class to come in. And everyone's going to have a varied opinion, and I'm sure you're going to give me yours below. But I believe the standard of individual we're bringing into the club in those three would be phenomenal. Now, they have to all sing off the same hymn sheet. There has to be a collective plan. Everybody has to pull in the same direction for this talent to work. It isn't just as simple as bringing in big names. Clubs have signed great managers, but because the structure of the club has been bad, the team has failed on the pitch. The same works internally as well. And if they get that right, the reputations, the pull and the power and the understanding of the game these individuals have is phenomenal. And what Dan Ashworth did when he took Brighton from where they were to get them right up into the Premier League, Newcastle's growth in the last 2 years, a large part of that has been down to him. Now, Man United need a proper rebuild, because we ain't just going to go from where we are now to getting a new owner and suddenly being at our peak again. It's impossible. It's going to take time. Brilliant recruitment, standards, and great practices need to be implemented. But as I say, I'm not getting carried away with this news, because we've seen things fall apart before under the Glazers, but it's one to keep an eye on. In terms of deals for January, now this one caught my eye today because it's a player that I think we need, or a position that essentially we need. The Barcelona are supposedly ready to listen to offers for Raphinha, with Manchester United considering proposing a swap deal involving the winger Jadon Sancho. Now, this just could be, again, it comes from sport, so sport come with a sketchy reputation. I'm not going to deny that. But looking at this and just looking at giving an opinion based as a fan, I look at it and think, what right-sided attackers in the world are genuinely available? Now, I know the standard merchants will say, go and get the best. Go and get the best. That makes sense, but what if you can't afford the best? What if the best do not want to join you? There are multiple factors. Sometimes they're just completely out of the recruitment team control. So I'm looking at it from a realistic point of view, and I think Raphinha is attainable. I also think if we could actually get somebody onto that right-hand side who could, one, beat a man, beat a man, take somebody on, cut some balls back into that 6-yard box. I'm not saying Man United suddenly be in a title race. Let's not get things twisted. But I do think Man United would suddenly be in a position where we could start scoring a few more goals, winning a few more matches. Raphinha is left-footed. He can play on the left, but he isn't afraid to use his right foot. He's got speed, he's got power, he's got good skills. The amount of times we see Antony, we've seen Jadon Sancho, we've seen whoever it may be on that right-hand side, Rashford, isolate a defender but not beat them. And if they do, really go on the outside and try and cross a ball, it's infuriating, genuinely infuriating. And I think Raphinha could be that difference. So if this was a real deal, if this deal turns out to be real and we're trying to motor it along, I am 110% behind it. Bring me Raphinha. Let's move Jadon Sancho onto another big club. Pasture's new. Fingers crossed he absolutely kills it. I actually want the best of it. I've been reflecting a lot on the Jadon Sancho situation. And it's about keeping the same energy. I've definitely been annoyed with him during games. I've definitely been frustrated with him at times. But he has just fallen victim, like every other player that's joined our club, every other young player that's been promoted into the first team. And I'd love to see him move on and do brilliantly elsewhere. But give me your views, give me your opinions in the comments section below. Now, this story is an interesting one, that Tottenham have held talks over a potential move for Man United target Jean-Claire Todibo. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've watched hours and hours of this man play. I never do. That isn't my way. It's not the way I do things. What I read about him, though, is very, very, very good indeed. What people have to say about him, what scouts say. And as I said to many, many, many of you before, try your best to not read a scouting report from the last, say, 7 or 8 months when Man United have been linked to him. Try and read things that are a year, 18 months, 2 years old. Try to find things that are not in an article where it's connected to him having a transfer, especially if that journalist is connected to the football club in which he's reporting on, because you can often get a bias in that. You know, you can often get a bias. You can often, it can often skew things, as it were. But this is a very, very talented young centre-back. The fact that Spurs are looking at him worries me, because he kind of fits that profile of defender that they're looking at. I do think it's interesting. They have Romero and Van de Ven. Why do they need another very good defender who's going to want to play first team football? Maybe there's a plan to utilize 3 centre-backs. We know now a lot of clubs like to use more than 2 centre-backs in a back line, even if one's in a fullback role. That doesn't kind of suit the way he inverts his fullbacks, but we'll see. This is a deal that Man United can't allow Spurs to do. One, we're literally getting the owner of Nice by a part of our club. How we can let a player like Jean-Claude Todibo, his talent and his ability and his ceiling to join another Premier League rival would be crazy to me. And I hope we sign him. There's no rule. There's no guarantees that he'll work at Spurs or he'll work at Man United. But having watched a bit of him, what I've read about him, I'm excited about the prospect of this player. And again, as I mentioned earlier with Onana going to Arsenal, this is somebody with very good technical ability, good reading of the game, but has a great physical presence. And Varane has a little bit of that, but he is getting old. You know, we have Maguire that's slow, Lindelof that's a little bit soft, Johnny Evans that's old. We lack physical specimens who are equally technical on the ball in the Man United backline. And the one thing I want United to focus on, and Raphinha is a bit of that. He isn't the tallest man in the world, but he's quick. We need athletes. We need strong and fast players in this team with good technical ability. You need that now in the Premier League. Whether people like it or not, it's the reality of the situation. Todibo, Raphinha in January, a Manchester United situation doesn't change dramatically. We don't become Premier League title challengers, but you will see a vastly improved team, especially if we become a little bit more compact out of possession, as we saw recently. People who've tuned in, I want to say thank you. Please hit like buttons before you leave. Subscribe to The Terrace, and we'll see you all again soon. Peace.